It's 11:11. Make a wish.
So,
Okay.
hi. I've talked a lot on my platform about what my autism looks like and how it manifests in me and how my ADHD is and how all of those things interact. And, I was written off in a way, but not so much that I didn't still get taken seriously. And so, one of the things that I really want to learn from the people we're speaking to this season is how did well, first, if you're willing to share what diagnoses you have and how long it took you to get to that place to figure out that you had those things. And then once you figured out you had those, when you went back and reviewed, what signs do you see are like glaringly obvious now that were missed? And how are they different? A, the Rain Man narrative, and B, from the narrative that I talk about. And that was a lot of questions.
So my diagnoses or my understanding of myself is that I am autistic, ADHD, EDS. And how long did it take me to find those things out? My whole life. I am now 39, and I actually had an opportunity to find out that I had EDS when I was 16 years old. I had a new friend I met in high school who had Marfan's, and they were describing their Marfan's. Besides their physical appearance, they were describing all the other things. And I was like, wait, that's everything I have. Like every single one minus the physical appearance. So I went to my mom, and then I went to my doctor, and my mom is amazing. She's always been super affirming and super believes everything. If I bring up something, she believes me. So it's been amazing. I have a blessing in that. And the doctor immediately dismissed me because they're like, well, you're not white, you don't have blue eyes, and you're short and fat. So get the fuck out of here, essentially. And I'm like, now looking back, I was like, so mad because I could have known then and then done things to protect my body.
20 plus years. 20 plus years.
Yeah, exactly. That's just the EDS. Then you have autism. I have been in therapy since kindergarten. They knew something was wrong with me and they put me in therapy. So I didn't get to go to PE. I went to therapy, like group class or whatever. So I've been othered my entire life. And nobody, either they knew I was autistic and no one told me, or my mom, because my mom would have told me.
How did they explain that? What was if you remember, what was the premise for you not going to PE, which I'm sorry, probably would have been better for you than this group therapy? Were they like, okay, Jesenia, they're going to go here? And like, if you remember at all, like,
I don't remember what the reasoning was or why they told me that I needed to do this, but later I like when I was slightly older, I think maybe 4th or 5th grade, I asked my mom, like, hey, why do I go to these things and everybody else goes over here? And she's like, well, we have problems at home, so we want to make sure you have extra care. Like, it was very blatantly obvious to everyone that we were being abused at home because of my father, and there was like a whole lot of stuff. So it was posed to me both by the people who were giving me treatment and my mom that it was like, this is meant to help you. So I was just like, all right, that's fine. But in all of those, being surrounded by people who have potentially had the training to know these things, no one ever clocked that I was. But all of my other siblings did have either a diagnosis or some other. And I have 5 brothers and a sister. So all the boys got the attention.
That's just what I was about to ask.
Not that it was enough attention or all of the right tools, but they had some
kind of like
support in some minor way, right?
Yeah.
And everybody was
justification, if you will, for lack of a better word.
And no, everybody was like, no one, we don't have to worry about Jesenia. She's smart. She's well spoken. She's a great
He
student.
never needs any help.
Right. And later on, when I found out I was autistic, which my therapist was like, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I think you're autistic, and I think you should go get diagnosed. And I was just like, autistic? What is that even? Right? Like
how old were you when that was mentioned?
that was 20. I was 37, so just a few years
okay,
ago.
recently. Okay.
Yeah. And I started going to therapy because I was in burnout and I was spiraling because as a trained biochemist, I was seeing what was happening with COVID and how unseriously everyone was taking it. And I was getting really, really mad at everything. And I was just like I said, I was spiraling. And I have, 20 years of being in therapy experience. So it wasn't like I wasn't prepared or equipped to handle this kind of stress. But it was definitely, I was like, I need more support. And not realizing it was autistic burnout. I had a neurodivergent therapist, and they were able to clock me right away because surrounded by therapists my whole life and nobody knew or nobody said anything.
What generation, if you could tell, is your therapist?
Oh, they're probably my age. So elder millennial.
Because so my therapists were probably, my most recent therapist was the same age as I am. And we had a lot in common. And I had mentioned, she knew my son was autistic. I had mentioned it, and she kind of wrote me off, but not like dismissive, but in the way that like someone like me would be dismissed, I'm just wondering if that was part of the gap in someone my age.
And I think that it's not just that, but like I have people in my friends group who were trained psychologists and psychiatrists, and they ended up quitting because they couldn't stand the white supremacist nature of the whole field. But before quitting, they were basically at the end and quit. And all of them had said, I didn't know I was autistic after the end of all my training. TikTok was the reason I found out I was autistic, not all of my psychological training in this field. So that gives you some context for how badly it's
okay. That is, TikTok. I had ideas about myself before TikTok, but that's only because my son was diagnosed in 2007 when he was 5.
Yeah, most people.
But it still took me 15 years later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we're planning on making a panel of autistic people who are, all the way from executives to artists, and make this panel talking about autism from autistic people. They were reminding me, because I've been in this bubble of surrounding myself with autistic people, to be finally in community for the first time in almost 40 years with my peers. They were reminding me that there's still people out here who are saying vaccines gave their kid autism, or Tylenol gave their kid autism, or they can cure autism, and all of this. And I was just like, oh yeah, I forgot that is still like the prevalent dominant culture narrative. Yeah. And so I keep trying to remind myself that not everyone is in depth or have done the autistic thing of deep diving into autism and
like first you have to convince them that you actually are.
At this point, my husband's like, you think everyone's autistic? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I can clock them now, so I know what it is. And if I'm in a conversation with you, I basically told my boss, I was like, my former boss, I was like, I need a shirt that says, if we're talking, you're probably autistic.
Okay. So it's very interesting that you said that, because for me, and clearly you don't do this, the people that knew me before I came out officially and diagnosed, there are varying degrees of like tiptoeing around me telling them what I haven't been wrong yet, let's just say. So,
I love that
yeah,
so
now that
so
I'm
much.
out, it's like that. But with people, because they're the people who are like still around after the revelation, and so they're still here, and so I don't want to alienate them. Like I feel like they'll get
It's going to
there.
be relationship based, absolutely. But I think that I do a similar thing where what I do is like, oh, you know how I am with I can't, my thoughts, they like to squirrel and run off. And like, I will breadcrumb them into agreeing with all of the things that I do. And then at the end is the big reveal. Oh, and by the way, I'm ADHD. So, all those things you related with, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. So,
There's a reason.
it is, yeah,
Birds of a feather.
it's fun to do. And 9 times out of 10, they're either like, I don't know enough about it to agree, or they're like, oh yeah, that's possible. That makes sense. Right. So it's not often that you have people who have that, at least that I've encountered, that have that
Yeah.
very, very harsh negative understanding and preconception of autism, like myself and most of my family. None of us knew what autism was. We had absolutely no concept of it, because when I was told I was autistic, I was like, what is that even? Right. Because people are like, oh, you don't look like autism, in the face of autism. And I'm like, okay, but what does that even mean? Right. Because what they're thinking is something like they're trying to conflate it with a learning disability or Down syndrome or any of the other neurodiversities that can also be comorbid with autism.
Right. Right. So that's something I hadn't considered. So I had no real concept of autism at all growing up until Rain Man, that movie. But you and I grew up in different environments. So you had like zero concept, even like Rain Man probably wasn't a movie you went and saw.
No. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a concept of it. All I knew, the only time I ever heard the word autism was in my biochemistry studies, when we were learning about vaccines and how there were the anti-vaxxers and people who were claiming that vaccines cause autism. And I was just like, we were taught about why that's a lie and why people believe that and all this. And I was like, oh, interesting. But that was the only context with which I've ever heard that word. And I never like dug into it further. I had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
Or what it meant. And you're learning stuff, so you're just learning the science stuff. And I moved on. I was like, okay, cool, moving on. And so when I heard it again, I was like, what is that? Oh my gosh. And then immediately started the autistic thing of deep diving into hyper focusing and
now I must be an expert.
And then I came across your content as well, and I heard about EDS, and then I was like, okay, what is EDS? And then I went and did research online, and nothing that I was reading online was fitting. And this is the same thing that happened with autism. It wasn't fitting my experience or what I was hearing. So I'm, as a trained researcher, I was like, I'm going to research the hell out of this. And the research didn't help me come to a conclusion. And then I was like, let's hear from the people who have this. And that's when I went to TikTok, autism, EDS, ADHD, all of them. Once I listened to women, and specifically women of color, talking about all of these things, all of a sudden things started to click. And I was like, oh, I do have this. And now I want to talk about it. But even if I were to type in these searches in TikTok, like Black autistic women or Hispanic autistic women or people of color that are autistic or have EDS, you cannot find them. The algorithmic suppression is just intense.
It's real. And that's why we wanted to do what we're doing, because
right now
algorithms seem to like our faces, and so hey, we'll get you in with our face, and oh, look over here.
Right, we'll do the switcheroo. And so the other factor about having EDS in a bigger body is that we have other complications, and so then people just assume that we can't have EDS because we're big bodied. Right. So you can easily tell that this is if you know what to look for, this is hypermobile. This is hypermobile, but you don't think they're like, oh, you're fat, so we can't tell that you're hyperextending. And I'm like, okay, that's a lie. You're just not trying hard enough. Right. You're not looking for the things. You're not trained to do it. So at this point, most of us in the community are well, better versed than most doctors. And I mean, trying to find a doctor that understands EDS, much less even knows what it is a needle in a haystack still, even in 2023. With all the internet searches and all the things that we have, it's impossible to find. But then you have things like lipodema and lymphedema that are actually changing the way that our bodies look, so that people are conflating medical issues with obesity, and you're just not healthy enough. You just don't eat healthy enough. I eat healthy.
You could be malnourished. You can be malnourished in an obese body. Yeah. I would.
So there's a couple of creators that I follow who have talk about lymphedema and lymphedema, and it's very obvious. Like one person, I forget their name now, I'll have to come back and share it with you, but they're a very, very thin woman, because they've spoken about this before, that they have severely harmed their body trying to lose the weight, and then they got really thin, but you could still see all of the lymphedema on their body, and it's like deposits that cannot be removed. So it's just from regular dieting. So imagine being in a plus size body and everyone's shaming you, and that adds to the stress, that adds to the health issues, that adds to the social determinants of health and then lack of access to healthcare because of all of the bias, because we are in bigger bodies because of our genetic medical conditions. It's a snowball.
It is. It hurts my brain when, I mean, it's just the issues compounding. Like, man, I was thinking, I
could see your brain just went in 5 different directions, and you're trying to get rid of them.
I can't. Yeah, that's one of the problems. Oh, I remember now. I don't know if you experienced this, but I'm sure you did. The shame and the self-loathing of not being able to do things people think you should be able to do because of either you did it before or whatever. This is mainly like, I am strong and could do I could never do a pull-up or really good push-ups, and it never made sense. I didn't understand that these are trash, and and so I would work out and like build muscles, and I still couldn't do it, or I am gonna have cellulite on my ass. Like, no matter what I do, it's just the way my fascia is in my skin. I used to not like to wear shorts or bathing. I would always cover up with a wrap or like wear capris. But since I got my diagnosis and I know that it's not my fault, I have far less shame about my body and like how I curse at it all the time, but.
Well, there's so many things that I want to say about what you just said, because it's like the intersectionality of being in a disabled body or in a, chronically ill body with a genetic thing. And then you have people imposing Eurocentric beauty standards on top of that. And then you have white supremacy culture added to that. So you have a perfect storm of trying to create a way. And then on top of that, you have capitalism to try to, make you feel inferior, not only to keep you oppressed, but make you spend money to try to rectify something that is unrectifiable, which is the existence of a human body, right? And so there's never going to be anybody who meets that standard. Even you as a white woman cannot meet the standard. There's no perfection, right? That doesn't require a knife and a lot of money. Even then, what is perfection? Because everything is subjective. But you have all of these factors on top of our own health being affected by the fact that we have to carry the shame and the anguish and the self-loathing that we are taught by not only our parents, but our society. We are indoctrinated into a white supremacist colonized world, and we all are dealing with some form of this kind of patriarchal mentality. And so now we're all having to unlearn that. So yeah, I had a long time where I've been basically the same size since I was 14, but I had gone through all the different stages of grief when it came to understanding like what I should look like, and then how healthy I should be, and why can I why can I leg press 450 pounds without ever trying? Like, I can go to the gym after not being in there for a year and leg press 450 pounds, but I can't walk a block around I can't walk.
Word.
Okay.
Word.
So
Squats
like,
for life, man.
so like bodies are not meant to be uniform. I mean, the whole BMI is a complete lie. The person who even created it said this is not meant to be used for medical diagnoses, but we still do it. And we're
And why did he
using
make what was the original purpose of it?
I think that it was a small sample, and I think it was for standardizing clothes, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm not remembering 100% right now. But it's a statistical model that they created that was completely false. And even the U.S. Navy did a study where they tried to like figure out why everybody was crashing, and this is why women were better airplane pilots. I forget the name of what anyway, they've done studies on this. There's no one body that fits the norm, right?
Right.
And what is the norm anyway? We are a diversity, we are a spectrum, not only in autism, but as humanity. Why are we trying to conform to something that we're not?
Well, right. Like homogeny, what's the word?
Homogeneity?
Yeah, that one. That like that I don't know, it's like stagnant. Like it's like entropy. The growth in a closed system. I mean, we need diversity.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, even within EDS, right? There's a misconception that like if I'm not stretchy, I don't have EDS, and I'm like, it's not an all or nothing, and it could be I have really tight hips and really loose knees. Like that doesn't mean that I don't have EDS because I can't bend my fingers back or because I can't do party tricks. And then there's like all of the internal stuff you have no outward symptoms or outward expressions of EDS, and you have a bunch of issues with your cardiovascular collagen, right? So collagen is in every single part of our bodies. And when I start listing all of the symptoms to for Thanksgiving, I went home for the first time. I got to see my family in 8 years or something. Now that I know that I'm autistic, I was like, guess what, everyone? We have autism, ADHD, and EDS on both sides of our family. So yay. Everyone was on board except one of my siblings, and they're in denial because of religious indoctrination. So we got to work on that. But it's still that misunderstanding of, well, my daughter, because my niece is autistic and she doesn't want to acknowledge that. And so I'm telling them,
how old is she?
She'll be 12 this year. And so I told my mom about autism, and she didn't know what it was. And I was like, go on YouTube and watch a few videos and come back. And she was like, oh yeah, I'm autistic. Like no question whatsoever. Like once you knew what it was very clear. But she, she's comparing her. She's like, oh, the classic autism response. They're not like so-and-so, so they can't be autistic. Yeah. And
I'm glad your family was so receptive to it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I don't think they would have been 2 or 3 years ago. That's the other interesting thing. Like, I'm really excited that they're all on their own in their own silos coming to the same conclusions about imperialism, white supremacy, culture, colonization, because we're all obviously indigenous, right? We are indigenous from 2 different countries, from my mom's side and my dad's side. And then we're first generation here in the United States. So like we are very much starting to learn about our indigeneity and our culture and all of these things that we didn't, and like community and all of the things that white supremacy and colonization and capitalism has stolen from us. And so like they're all individually coming to these conclusions, and it was really exciting to like have this conversation with them over Thanksgiving. But it's just so obvious now that I know what to look for, that all of us always had it, like on both sides of the family.
Yeah.
But that's what I was going to say. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say those summers in Alabama with my papa, where I was like on the swing reading encyclopedias. Like I'm like, oh, Oh,
Yeah. Or like my hyperverbal, hyperlexic person, having full conversations about and running circles debating with adults when I was 4 years old. Like, hello. It's just hilarious how that the signs were there. We just didn't know. We just didn't know. Right. And we're still in the early stages of even understanding all of this. So I have a unsubstantiated theory that autism,
ooh.
EDS, and ADHD are all part of the same spectrum. Like they're
Oh,
not,
yeah.
they're all interconnected, that they are not. So anybody who tells me that they have ADHD, I'm like, hey, do you have this? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, maybe you should look at EDS. And
Yeah.
then, or maybe you should look at autism, and so it's gonna vary. And funny enough, like my husband also is neurodiverse, and so I've been on the fence trying to figure out if he's also autistic because he leans more ADHD. And so I'm like, are you though? But are you? But are you?
So I'm going to add a few things to your list of things to look out for.
Yeah,
Are you ready?
go for it.
Okay, so you also need to consider if there's any kind of queerness in that person. So they might not realize they have that, but there's someone in their family or they are queer.
Oh,
Because
I'm the queer one in the family.
yeah, because there's that. And then I lost the other one, but there's another one.
So the Audi gender or the queerness, all tied up into the neurodiversity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then just like the have you heard of the neural pruning theory? Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm really fascinated by this, and I'm just like that explains a lot from in my mind a lot about the fact that we are so hypersensitive.
Relational.
Say that again?
Oh, hypersensitive. Yes. I was saying just relational, being able to make these connections.
Yes, to make the pattern recognition
Mhm.
and also having the sensitivity, but also having like I think of us as antennas. I mean, all of us are energy, right? When we get down to the quantum level, we are all energy, and energy can neither be created nor destroyed. So the fact that there are things that we can't explain with science that are proven time and time again across cultures, across time, like we have all of these energetic powers. And I mean, the fact that we produce heat, the fact that we can talk to each other and have these
We're batteries. We're
changes.
organic batteries.
Yes, exactly. We're organic
Yeah.
batteries, we're organic computers. We are the thing. Human beings are very interesting and fascinating things, but we are also just giant bundles of energy. So, there's just a whole lot that magic is just science that we haven't figured out yet.
I like that. That's a really. Did you just make that up?
I made that up a while ago. Yeah.
I like it. You should put that on
On a shirt.
on a shirt. Yeah. Okay, so your family's on board
Yeah.
and your husband's on board. You had mentioned former
Employer? Oh yeah, they
So-
actually fired me and were extremely discriminatory towards me, and I was too burnt out to fight it. Even though I did try to fight it, I tried to find lawyers to help me. They were inundated with so many claims that they couldn't take my case. The EEOC has reported a 78% increase in disability and discrimination claims this year alone.
Is that just in your region?
No, that's the entire country.
Damn.
And if we look at autistic numbers, I have some numbers to rattle off. I love numbers.
I'm
a data scientist or data analyst. I'm sorry, not a data scientist. Those are two different things. I'm a scientist and a data analyst. And
I'm an anthropologist and a forensic accountant, but I like to say that I'm a forensic anthropologist, even though that's not true. That's what I really want
those
to
are
do.
specific different things, which is so funny.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, give me them
these
numbers.
Only 14% of autistic adults are employed. Okay. Of the unemployed autistic adults, and this is just the United States, of the unemployed autistic adults, 85% of them have a college degree or have some college. have taken college and had to drop out because the system was so discriminatory and horrible for them. 85%.
Wow, that is those. Wow.
So it's not from lack of trying. It's not from lack of education. It's not from lack of intelligence. It is literally from lack of accessibility in the workplace. Yeah. It is societal, and it is dominant culture replicating white supremacist models in education, in corporate America, in basically every system is set up to oppress not only us, but minorities.
Yep. Yeah.
And intersectionality. Yeah.
So that number.
It's frustrating. And that is why I'm doing things like trying to connect us. So this is like become my mission.
Okay, so tell us about that.
Yeah, so I started my business called Neurospicy Networking. I'm just trying to network neurodivergent people together because we can create amazing things, but we are all so under-resourced and under-supported. Just because I'm an adult and found out that I was autistic after being an adult and after successfully living my life all this time, I don't need support. Well, guess what? If I didn't live with my husband, he does a lot of heavy lifting for our family because I can't cook for myself. I forget to eat. It doesn't occur to me. And then all of a sudden I'm crashing and falling on the floor and I'm like, what is going on? And then he's like,
I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm by myself today and I haven't really eaten yet.
Yeah. Have you drank water today? Everyone who's listening?
Drink water, eat some food, and take a nap. And pee.
And pee, yes. It's not, we have alexithymia. We don't realize that our bodies are sending us signals until it's emergency. And so it's like, I'm going fine all day. And then all of a sudden it's like, feed me now, or I got to run to the bathroom, or, there's never an in between. And so this is where I was going to say that EDS people and literally anybody who's neurodivergent just needs to up their electrolyte intake. If there's nothing else to do, please up because we don't absorb nutrients as well as we should. A lot of us have gut issues, so we need to be taking
a probiotic too.
Yeah, magnesium, iron, and vitamin D. Chronic, like for me, I've gone back-to-back blood testing and after taking high doses of all of these things, and they were still like, "You're still down. You're still low. What is going on?"
They tested my vitamin D at the end of the summer, like when it should be at its peak. It was 29. And that's because I had brought it up. And they were like, this isn't good. I'm like, I know.
So you kind of have to pack it in. And then you have to add to the fact that no matter how healthy you eat, the food in the United States is drastically unhealthy or nutrient deficient. So you could be eating all organic everything and it's still going to be nutrient deficient because of the practices that are food practices here in the United States. I went to Europe for 2 weeks. I lost 30 pounds and was healthier than I'd ever been. And I was eating all the foods that I can't eat here in the United States, like bread and milk and cheese. Yeah. The food here is poisoning us.
I mean, I knew that. Like, I knew our food was garbage. But what?
Yeah.
I need to go to Europe.
Yeah. Our imperialist country is trying to dominate the world, funding genocides all over the world, and killing us in the process, and milking us and all of our labor to do all of this harm across the world. And that leads me back to what I was saying about my work, is that I'm trying to connect neurodiverse people, and I'm trying to create networks of people doing mutual aid. I'm connecting to other organizations and other groups of people who are doing things. And like you mentioned, you were just scrolling to see protests on Black Friday. And one of the initiatives I was trying to do with our community, One Free Community, is make Black Friday red, and essentially trying to help people connect the dots that all of the spending that we're doing is being used to fund these genocides. And so stop spending and start using the abundance that already exists all around us, and connect to the community to get those resources shared across each other. So that's essentially all that mutual aid is do you have a cup of sugar, neighbor, right? Like, I have a ton of stuff that I wish I could just hand to the people who need it rather than give it to Goodwill, that abuse disabled people legally, underpay them under the minimum wage.
Legally.
Disabled people don't have marriage equality because they can't, if they're married to somebody, they can't they lose their threshold of the amount of money that they can have at any one point, just so that they can continue to have health care, which they need.
Why we need a universal basic income, people.
Yeah, and universal health care. And I mean, I can keep going all day on this tangent. This is supposed to be about EDS, but
Oh no, it's about EDS or neurodivergence, or like just you've got the mic, my friend.
Thank you. So yeah, it's just trying to connect to community, connect to neurodivergent people together, because all of us are doing amazing things, and all of us love the things that we love. We really love them, and we know a lot about them. And so why can't we use that knowledge power and that hyper focus power to help and benefit our own community? And so we have created programs like Accessible Virtual Pride or virtual protests, or just creating more accessible and neuro-friendly spaces and events. And all of this is done with no money. Like, all the things, like, look at our website, onefreecommunity.com. All of the amazing community events that we've done it with very little money. The donations that we used we used to pay ASL interpreters so that we could make it more accessible. And we, are still being suppressed on all of our socials. So we're trying to connect with larger creators to try to get some of our work out there, not only our initiatives, but just to help people, right? Just to get people connected to community, because so many of us are raised after generations and generations of colonization, don't really understand what it is to be in community. So even just like learning how it is to interact with other human beings and not assume the worst out of people, that's something that a lot of neurodiverse people have trauma around.
I'm glad you're doing that community. The other thing that I think is great about what you're building with One Free Community is so many young people now, Gen Zers, are also disabled, and they need a place to, I'm 46, but my kids are in college, and my friends have kids who are in college, and some of those kids are finding it's hard to be disabled in college, and they don't have, they're like, how can I find my people? And so I wanted to ask you, I know you accept everybody, but is there a place for like college kids at One Free Community? And
we have college kids in our community. We have high school kids in our community.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Yeah, and we have had discussions about how we keep our younger community members safe, but we always say that we're centering the most marginalized people, and the people who have been systemically marginalized get to go to the front of the conversation, right? So
for sure.
We're talking about, like, we're focusing on decolonizing and building community and building mutual aid in our community. So we don't even have a trans section, because our community is so queer and trans. Like,
Gotcha.
It is baked into our community. So we have different, like, categories for different topics. We're very neurocentric, disability centric, queer centric, all of the rainbow of the things.
I actually really like that, because I think when I think instinctively about organizing things, I don't necessarily put an age on it.
It's not meant to, because that also continues to add to that dominant culture.
Perpetuates the stovepiping. So
Yes.
That's a gross business term. Anyway. I just wanted to put it, because one of the things I want to do as a side project is boomers have a bad rep. Gen X if and when you talk about us, maybe you either like love us or you hate us. And there's like this subset I've noticed of millennials that like either loves Gen X or hates Gen X. And I'm like, what did we do, man? Besides,
It's a trauma response from whoever their parents were, for sure,
correct.
or
Oh,
whoever their
100%.
adults were in their life. But how do we get past that, right? I think a lot about this when I'm thinking about how many people are so full of hate and so full of anger, and whether it's because of trauma or you are wrong because you have all this indoctrination and you don't know it yet. Regardless, I always think in the long term. So I'm like, when we are past all of this, when we've done the work, we fought the fight, we won, and now we have to bring everybody into community. That's where I'm always thinking like, okay, so how do I bring you along? Because I love you. I want you to come with me to this better new world, and we have to dream that together. And so getting those people to that place, like bring them along, that's where I'm thinking. So yeah, there are a lot of people that are full of hate, and I don't indulge trolls. I don't talk to people who want to fight with me. That's not my role. But there are people out there who want to have that conversation and bring them along.
I guess that's amazing. I guess where I didn't phrase my question. I did and I didn't. You answered my question, but that my question was secretly two parts, and you didn't know it because that was a secret that I just realized. I guess where I'm going. So if this doesn't already exist within One Free Community, I want to talk to you more about how we can help people with this particular issue. And it's that helping people to understand that disability doesn't look like what you think it looks like.
Mhm.
And so we talked about that some at the top with like, what does autism look like? And X, A, B, C, X, Y, Z. But I find I'm 46. I know what I look like. I go to Pilates. The majority of the classes that I'm in Pilates, I'm with people who are like my mom's age. And I have more problems than they do in some cases. But if I complain about having a hurt knee or something's going on with me, or like I was in the hospital in September, and when I got back to class, like I'm friends with a few of the people and like we text and stuff. When I came back in and they were like, where were you? And I was in the hospital, and oh, you're too young to have those problems. Is there support for I'm having these issues, but these kids, Gen Z, they're having these issues? Is there some of the younger kids who know that I'm dealing with what I'm dealing with are dealing with the same things?
Mhm.
Is there, I want to like help them build the confidence to educate and, like you said, bring people along. So like, are there tools for the youngins? Because they're better. They're better at this shit than I am, honestly, like in many cases. And I'm going to say that that's because of their Gen X parents. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you. I to answer your question, I don't know that there's a specific place for it. We have different forums, like we have a disability chat and resources forum.
Okay,
and
so that
have like we have places where people ask for advice about whatever it may be, like an autism section, an EDS section, just depends on what you need, right? But I still think we should talk, because what we might want to do is have like events or spaces. We also partner with a couple of other organizations that have like more mental health leaning kind of things. And we're not trying to do and be everything, right? What we want to do is network all of these groups together so that we can send you, if we're not the right place for you, awesome, let's help you find the right place so that you can find the community you need. The idea of making it an in-person community too is one of the things that we want to happen too. So we are trying to get enough people in our community that we can create not only like in-person events, but hybrid events. So one thing that
You
we
made me
are
remember.
now is other communities have reached out to us to help them make their in-person community a hybrid event. And so that's something we already offer and do. And if you want to schedule or create an event, then we can do something like either following that model or a different model where we can do just a one-time event. And then if you do enough of them, you start building a community. And then if you get enough people in that community showing up both in person and hybrid, then you can create an in-person space because you will have the people and the connections in the community to justify making such a huge project. Because it's not justify, but you know what I mean? Like you'll have the
Yeah.
hands to make the work light. I actually emailed one locally here and I was like, hey, can you make it COVID like mask mandated so that I can attend, so that many in our community want to attend, but we're still in a pandemic. We are still isolating because society has decided to leave us behind. And
Yeah, I
so
get so mad when I'm like, COVID-19, maybe the pandemic may be over. I'm like, what? It
yeah,
is?
I'm like, when to who to you, maybe, but it's not
Right.
over. Or how
Right.
everybody's like, I have this random summer cold that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, it's COVID. Oh, but my COVID tests are negative. It's because the tests are surpass the string testing. Like but I don't blame
Yep.
the general public for not understanding science because they're not scientists, but also we're in an anti-science country that pushes anti-intellectualism. So you have that too. But getting
Yeah.
back to the events thing, we were
Yeah.
also like talking about like I tried to organize a like low sensory hour, just like they do for elderly people. They have an elderly hour at the grocery store to do a sensory hour at the grocery store, so people with sensory issues can come in with no music, no overhead lighting, and just like the ambient lighting and be able to shop without this sensory overload.
That's all. I mean, I haven't really shopped since COVID very much. I don't ever since I've let in the sensations, ever since I've started getting into my body, I can't, and I don't know if you experience, I can't do things I used to do. And the skill regression, it's
Yes, the skill
starting
regression
as I'm
is real.
coming out of it this time, it's coming, my skills are starting to return, but not at the level, like there's definitely a loss there, and I think it's permanent. And I think it just goes with all of the things.
I think of skill regression, and I could be wrong in saying this, but I think that skill regression is like when you learn how to do something drunk, and then it's like state dependent, right? So our state dependent was we were in a trauma fawn response. We were in a fawn response most of our lives because we had to fit in to society. We were beaten into this fawn response, so we learned how to do these skills when we were in our fawn in that state. And now that we have healed and recovered, we have lost those skills because it was a state dependent thing. Similar to like learning something when you're drunk, you can't do it
I
when
was
you're sober.
gonna say that's why I was great at darts after I was 3 beers in, because my brain learned how to do it with that impairment. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good. That's
So
a
there's a lot that our community wants to do and a lot of things that we'd like to do, but all of us are disabled spoonies and trying to survive capitalism. So that's the other thing. Like a lot of us are still scrounging to, like I said earlier, we are a lot of us are highly intelligent, college educated, and can't get jobs because either they don't want to hire us, the hiring process isn't accessible, or they just do mass layoffs, like they uncoordinated mass layoffs where all the tech agencies or companies are laying people off so that they can then rehire them at lower wages. I mean, it's blatantly obvious
we're
at
we're
this point.
we're capital working capital. Like there's a reason that's a human capital, human resources. We're the livestock.
Exactly.
It's
I mean,
it's like what they're doing
labor.
with the real estate. They buy people
Yes.
out. It goes the other way though. They're buying people out, pricing them out of the market, and then they're like pricing people out of work too.
Yeah, and then hoarding the resources, right? There are enough houses in the United States to house every homeless person, but are they doing it? No. Are they housing the houseless? No. Are they taking care of any of us? No. They're sending all of that money. They couldn't send us money for COVID so that we can stay home and feed ourselves, but they can
No,
send
but we're gonna send.
billions of dollars to Israel to fund a genocide.
Yep.
You know, it's at this point, if you're not paying, you have to really not be paying attention, like obvious head in the sand, to really
Yeah.
not see the patterns that are happening. And for all of the people who are feeling that desperation and hopelessness, that's what they want you to feel. They want you to give up. They want you to be apathetic. It's too much. It's too hard, so that you won't fight for the liberation of the people who are being oppressed by these systems, right? And that's the white supremacy right to comfort. So there's so many things to consider here and so many nuances to it. But essentially, it's really frustrating when you have people who are going to have a response to a rhetoric response to no matter what you say, they have something to spit back at you. And that to me is a triggered response, that I can't talk to somebody if they can't even manage their own emotional state. How are you going to have a conversation with them? You can't.
Exactly.
So for the people who are finding this stuff out now and feeling like disconnected, hopeless, helpless, like the best thing that you can do is take that despair or take that anger and put it into action. This is where you're going to follow creators who are talking about this, connect to communities both locally and online, so that you can connect to the people who have been doing the work, right? A lot of new baby activists will be like, let me start a group. And I'm like, that's great, but what you actually should do is connect to the people who've been doing this work. So not only can you learn from their mistakes and their history and their knowledge, but you can also already be part of a group that is maybe not necessarily well established, but has some organization, and then you can come in and help. So I feel like that's like, use that energy and put it into something. I find myself getting sad or depressed, and I'm like, I need to go do something. And that might be a trauma response or a coping mechanism, whichever it may be, but that's okay, because I'm using it, right? I'm using it to fuel me into continuing to do something. And literally anything you do is something more that wasn't being done before, whether that's just talking to a friend about what they're going through and what you're going through, connecting to your community or to your neighbors or to an organization. All of these things are acts of resistance, and they are helping. Every single individual choice that you make to do something is actually helping the cause. But the problem is that everybody's like very separated and disconnected and in little silos. And so what I want to do is connect us all so that we can move as a unit. And that is part of the power that people have here that they're not realizing or not seeing, because the algorithmic suppression is that what we're doing is working. That's why they're spending millions and billions of dollars to pay people, pay politicians, and pay the news networks, and pay influencers to say these things, because they can't get that because they're in the wrong. It's
Yep.
basically it. Like you were saying earlier, when we were in we're on the right side of history, and all of the people that are on the wrong side of history haven't realized that they're listening to indoctrination, because everything that they're hearing is confirming the white supremacist lies that they have been raised in their whole lives. So why would they question it? It's really easy to see who the good guys are when you're seeing who's being harmed and who has the power, right? If the people in Gaza don't have power, they don't have any electricity, they don't have water, they don't have food. How that is not a war, that is a massacre.
What is one last thing you want to say that you didn't get to say? It can be about anything.
I think I got everything, which is exciting. I wanted to at some point ask you more questions about, like, I would love to come back on and have more of a let me pick your brains about what you know about EDS, because y'all know so much. And I have lots of questions, but I also feel like I want to have, like, maybe it should be like a panel discussion or something. We get like 2 or 3 people here.
Ooh, I love it. And that's something we're actually That's on our
Wish list.
list of goals. Yeah.
Yay.
And we are going to be at the EDS conference in Philadelphia next year. We're going to be we're not like presenting or anything, but like the two Bendy Mamas are going as an organization. And I have an interview. Well, it's like a pre-interview to interview, but someone who actually presented at the EDS conference last year. And she's local to Baltimore. So we're going to actually meet in person and we're going to play with the body braid that I bought from you.
Yay. Oh, I'm so glad. That's another
Yeah.
thing, the body braid. My gosh, if they just made it for plus size people, it would be perfect.
Yeah. And she's also a patient advocate. So she knows a lot about EDS because she's a patient also. So we have but yeah, I would love a panel discussion. Sounds really cool. Maybe in May when it's EDS Awareness Month. That'll give us enough time to like
plan it and prepare. Yes, I would love to.
Oh my God, am I planning shit? I'm back, baby. No, I'm not.